Beef cattle nutrition I look at with 3 young boys is not a lot different to kind of family nutrition. You got to provide energy in your potatoes there, in your sweet potato, protein, roughage, vitamins and minerals. If you have a good balanced diet, it's all there. But when we're drought feeding, or if you're a vegetarian, you might have to take some iron tablets. Or if you love your meat, you're going to start taking Metamucil fibre tablets, right? And it's a bit like drought feeding. A lot of people have been feeding drought rations for a long time. And so we have seen some issues there, and we'll cover those. Energy is generally the most limiting factor when you're drought feeding. And it can be supplied in a number of ways. Sugars and starch, for example, in ryegrass, or wiregrass has a lot of water-soluble carbohydrates in it. Starch is in grain. It's in roughage as complex carbohydrates. It gets broken down in the rumen into more simple sugars. And it can be supplied as fats and oils, for example, in cottonseed or as in distiller's dried grain. Protein can be limiting on old pasture or when you're feeding young stock. You can provide protein if you're providing as a supplement. It can be provided as a rumen protein, or what I would call the brug protein, as your rear. So you're just supplying nitrogen there to the rumen bugs, and they are living off the nitrogen that you're supplying and the carbon from the roughage and using that to live and breed, and the animal just digests those bacteria. And that's where a lot of the animal grazing animals actually get their nutrition, is just digesting rumen bacteria, things that die, things that overflow. You can provide protein as bypass protein, meaning it doesn't get digested in the rumen, and these are generally in the form of meals. Bypass protein is useful for cows. It's also very good for poor stock, very drought affected stock that you're trying to turn around. Sometimes grain can take a while to work, and bypass protein and the meal is really useful for turning around poor stock. Roughage is not essential in maintenance rations for stock, but it is essential for lactating cows, and it is essential for growing stock. So anything above maintenance needs roughage in the rumen. If you were to supply crushed wheat or barley at one end of a feeder and just the roughest bit of sorghum stubble or whatever, the animals are going to eat 20% roughage and about 80% concentrate. So you need that 20% of roughage in their diet. In this case, it's grape mark there. So I've had quite a few calls about feeding smoke taint affected grapes. And I have talked to some of the vineyards in the Hunter, so this does seem to be a pretty widespread problem. So as terms of residues, there doesn't seem to be the residue risk associated with grape mark as there might have been in other years. Because it's been so dry, low humidity, there's been very few fungicides applied to the grapes this year. So it seems a safer option, but if you're talking to the provider of the grape mark, or in this case just the grape prunings, then just ask what they've applied, and if they can't really tell you, then it would be best to go to cows and calves, something that's not going to go into the supply chain in the immediate future or the foreseeable future. It's likely that those grape prunings would be better than just roughage, because they're either going to have the sugars that are in the grapes, or if you dump them in a pile in your paddock, there's probably going to be some fermentation and we might get some alcohol there, and that's also a source of energy, and that's okay too. But we don't know exactly how much. My overall feeling is that you should still consider it just a roughage source, because we don't really know how much extra energy is in there, and a lot of it will be pretty high moisture content. The seed does have oil in it, but when it's just been fed out like this, hasn't been ensiled, the animal doesn't get the benefit of the oil in the seed. It just passes straight through. So we've had a major problem on our Trangie research station, which had been fed corn silage for a long time, and corn silage is very low in vitamin A. So we had calf mortality, low calf weights. And we are seeing vitamin A deficiencies, some calcium deficiencies in long-term feeding programs. I expect most of these things will turn around when animals have access to normal, a normal diet. Overall, cows need access to a large quantity diet of low to moderate quality, and that's why the coast has been good at having lots of cows and not growing out many stock. Calves, on the other hand, don't eat much food, but it needs high quality. So I guess I would ask you to keep that in mind. What are you going to have most likely in the next 6 months in terms of what you might carry through?